if you do not know who you're talking to, you will always communicate the way you feel you need to communicate, and that will be ineffective.
Well, welcome to another episode of Leadership 360, our Texas Conference podcast for our local leaders. I'm excited to have Elder Kenn Dixon, our Vice President. I'm going to try to get your title right because I didn't write it down. Vice President for Communication and Public Relations here at the Texas Conference. Is
Correct.
that right?
That is correct.
Oh, man, I get an A for getting your title right.
First time.
That's exactly right. So, Ken, so excited to have you on the podcast to talk about communication in our churches. But before we dive into that, and we've got a lot we want to cover, you've had a very interesting journey coming to the Texas Conference. You had a very varied background.
Yeah.
Done a lot of interesting things in life, and I think our audience would be very interested to know a little bit more about Kenn Dixon and how in the world he ended up at the Texas Conference.
Well, it all started, I was born.
There you go. That's good.
And to two parents. No, I grew up in New Orleans, had a wonderful experience growing up through Adventist education. It was kind of mixed bag. I went off to Ozark, and then they told me, you can't be here anymore. So after a couple of years, I had to leave, and then spent the 1 year in public school, and then went to Bass Memorial Academy, where I graduated from, and then went off to Oakwood. Oakwood was it was a fun time being away from home as a college student. So much fun that my GPA was 1.5. So I had to figure out what I was going to do from there, and then from there I kind of went into the Marine Corps, served in the Marine Corps, did a term in 4 years in the Marine Corps, and then got out of the Marine Corps and went back to school and went back to CUC. I was Washington Adventist University. Religion was my major. I got a bachelor's in religion. And then after that, started working at Greater Boston Academy, Allegheny West Conference in Columbus, Ohio. Then went to Boston, and then ended up in Texas, Southwest Region Conference. Worked as communication director and also youth pastor at City Temple. Oh. And as at that time that I actually went back to school and got a master's from Full Sail University in new media journalism, communication. And then, just a glutton for punishment, left 7 years in Southwest Region Conference, then went to back to Oakwood, served as the communication, integrated marketing director for integrated marketing and public relations.
Wow, that's a long title too.
I know.
You love your long titles.
I didn't give it to me.
Wow.
I would have called this something real simple. But they, that was the job at Oakwood. Was there for about 3 years. Then left Oakwood. Came to Texas, and right before leaving Oakwood, I got my APR, which is accreditation in public relations, and got a great opportunity to come here to Texas. Been here for 5 years, and now, when I left Oakwood, I actually went to school there and got a degree in pastoral development, a master's in pastoral development, and then now I'm sitting in the latter part of a doctoral degree from Liberty University in strategic media.
So you're trying to wallpaper your office walls with all your diplomas.
Yeah,
it's like, there's a blank spot. Let me just get one.
Why buy pictures?
That's exactly what you can pay for a degree.
Why buy pictures? Yeah. So that's my journey, and 20 years of that, communication and pastoral ministry at the same time. So it's been great. It's been a great journey.
And I will say, as someone in the field, but also then when I came to the office, working with you and talking about some of the dreams, this podcast being one of them, having that pastoral background in your experience has really kind of helped shape how you can more effectively be our communication director here at the conference, because you've got a sense of how the field works, what pastors need in the local church, and what resources we can provide. So I think obviously, God has used your experience in the past in all the different areas to bring you here to, man, I can't believe it's been 5 years.
5 years. Yeah.
Wow.
It's, the challenge, one of the things about being at a local church is that you you do see what's there, but then you also have to put it in the context of where you are. So the challenges that you have at a local church are always, the same challenges no matter where you end up going. It's no matter what era it is, it's always going to be resources. It's going to be people.
Right.
It's going to be time. All of those things have challenges, but you have to figure out how you're going to navigate around those things.
Right.
And then when technology increases, you have to see how you can utilize that for sharing the gospel, how to, effectively push churches and convince churches that, sometimes it's necessary to change.
Well, and that's really what your department here at the conference is to help communicate and help departments and local churches communicate the gospel.
Yeah.
You're not here just because, you're here to help be that conduit to communicate the gospel and to resource our local churches. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about communication in the church, because I'm going to divide it for our listeners and viewers' sake, kind of how communication practices inside the church, communicating in, and then more importantly, how do we communicate effectively with our communities? So COVID presented a lot of interesting dilemmas as we kind of made that quick shift. A lot of churches had to go to streaming because we were worshiping at home. A lot of churches went away from paper bulletins and all of that. And really a lot of I know the churches that I've been to, many of them still do not produce bulletins in the church. And the streaming is still going on. As we sit here now in 2024, what are some of the most effective ways that churches, pastors, leaders can communicate with their church members now that the bulletin has kind of gone by the wayside in many churches, and even streaming has changed a little bit in the last couple of years?
It's a good question. And one of the things that is difficult to kind of lay out for a church is the necessity to actually change. COVID forced churches to change. But now we're in this post-pandemic era, and people are still trying to do pre-pandemic activities. They got through the COVID. They said, we were able to do this, we were able to do that. Now everything has subsided. Let's just keep doing things like we did before.
Right.
But the problem is that you have to be more strategic because resources are not as readily available. So you have to be very targeted and strategic. So yes, we did away with the bulletin, but what did we replace it with? We replaced it with something. And some churches didn't replace it with anything. They just kind of talk about the announcements now.
Right.
But it becomes difficult because when you're trying to communicate with people, you have to use the medium in which people are comfortable with communicating. A lot of our churches, they speak to their members this, kind of, hey, let's put it on a screen. But if I happen to blink, I've missed that announcement. Yes, it cycles through, but we have, in the interesting thing about in marketing is that you have to put something 8 different places before someone will actually see it.
8. Wow.
Because their mind does not catch it immediately. So it has to be in 8 different places. So your channels, and people who are able to communicate multiple channels. That's there is a theory called the multimedia complexity theory, and it is being able to communicate on multiple channels to strengthen bonds between individuals, and that's where we are right now. But if a church does not, if it only speaks one way or one particular channel, there's going to be a whole gamut of individuals that are going to be missed.
So what are some of those channels that a local church can use?
Well, it really depends on the context of where that church is. So let's say it's still print. Okay, let's say it is texting. Let's say it's announcements from the front, word of mouth. Let's say it's you put posters up in the church, social media, the website. So I've just named 6 right there. And some people say, well, which one should we choose? All 6.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's not like, well, hey, now if your church, because there's someone in your church that gets it on one of those. So you have to be willing to be multifaceted, being able to speak you know, in a way that you're going to catch someone. But not only that, but you also have to have a two-way conversation. You can't just send information. You have to be ready to receive information. So on your website, you know, when you put things on your website, can people comment on it?
Right.
You know, in social media, do you allow them to comment on it? People say, well, I don't want them to comment on it because they're going to put nasty stuff. That's what the delete button's for. You know, but if you know what people are saying, then you're having a two-way conversation.
And I think that's part of the challenge that we've faced as churches is that we are very good at communicating via monologue.
Absolutely.
Here, 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 here. But that feedback and society in 2024 has really made communication both ways.
Yes.
Again, social media being really, I think, the driver of it, of people wanting that forum to don't just talk at me, talk
Correct.
to me, but allow me to respond back to what you're putting up there.
And not only that, but here's the thing that it becomes a little frustrating because some people will say, well, you're being very theoretical. You're being ready. You know, why do we just make it practical? Practical comes out of theory.
Okay.
In other words, you have to have something to say. How do we get to this point to make it practical? So what has transpired is that through data, through, you know, all of the different things that we have connected with people, the information. Okay, Siri.
Wow.
That's what technology will do.
Yeah, there you go. Always
mess
listening.
you all up. Thank you, Siri. Wow, Siri. Okay. I lost my whole train of thought. Okay.
So you're right. Theory has to, and I love what you talk is we have to find different ways to communicate to different people. You know, having young adults in my house. I mean, Facebook. Yeah, my son is on Facebook. My daughter has no interest in it.
Yeah.
Facebook is for more older than young adult. You know, older than young adults. So Facebook's going to hit a certain population. You know, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. But I wonder, do we as leaders in local churches, do we first have to ask why and what?
Yes.
Why are we communicating with our church members? Is it just information?
Yeah.
And what are we communicating? Is it just, okay, potluck, you know, this week it's Italian. Okay, make sure you bring your Italian. And I'm not sure. And I'm not sure as a local pastor for a long time, and you've been, you know, in the field too. I'm not sure we, including ourselves, process through that. It's just, we got to get this information out.
Correct. And that's a challenge. That is a challenge. And just, you know, just recently we've been doing some workshops and, you know, someone said, well, why can't you tell me how to do something? And I said, first of all, I need to know what is your goal? What do you want to do? And I want to reach people. I mean, it's so broad. Right. It's not specific. And this is where the challenge comes in, is because when we're trying to talk to our members are used to all sorts of channels throughout their lives, throughout their week. And we're very comfortable with one channel or two channels, and we use that. And then we realize that members didn't get the information.
Right.
Because they're used to. So we have to ask the question, okay, how or what are we using? Is it effective? And that's one of the things that, you know, we don't circle back and evaluate to see, is it effective? When we're talking to our members, how do you, member A, B, C, how do you want me to communicate to you? It's as simple as asking a question, taking a survey. You know, if you have a large church, do a survey. Yeah. You know, or sometimes there's a straw poll, raise your hand, you know.
Sure, sure.
know? So that's the thing. And as you mentioned, yes, it's try to hurry up and get the information out, but we have to do better at, and I'm going to say a very bad word right now. We have to do better at planning.
Yeah. It's true. No, you
know, we shouldn't be, everything should not be the plane is on fire.
Right.
There should be times in which you're able to plan how you're going to communicate and what you're going to say. And I know some people are like, oh, that's just too much work. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're absolutely right. Again, you've got to figure out who, what, where. I mean, the whole thing. And I think we love the shotgun approach.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try, and
The
it
results-
doesn't hit.
Yeah,
It doesn't hit.
The results tell us
Yeah.
exactly what what happens.
Yeah.
We get nothing.
Yeah.
Or we get very minimal, and then we celebrate the minimal.
Right.
So
Let me pivot. Man, the time is going by already because I'd love to unpack that a little bit. And we'll kind of circle back at the end. But I think our role in the church is to communicate. We have been given, theologically, this message for the world in which we live in the last days of Earth's history. The challenge is, how effective are we communicating it to our community? And I'm going to start with this. We as Adventists have a lingo, a language, whatever you want to. And when we communicate, we sometimes forget, and I'm guilty as anybody else, we forget that someone that is not familiar with our community of faith doesn't know what ADRA is, or what church budget is, or what, mission spotlight. I mean, we could go down the list of the things that are haystacks that are unique to us. So I want to ask, from your perspective, how can we as members, when we're communicating with our community, how do we remind ourselves to not speak our language, but to speak the language of our community, which means not necessarily using all this lingo?
Well, I'll tell you this. One of the most important things you can do is you have to know your community. If you do not know your community, you will always pivot and default to what is comfortable for you and what is safe. So if your community, if you do not know who you're talking to, you will always communicate the way you feel you need to communicate, and that will be ineffective.
Right. Okay, so let's put a pin in that for a second. Let's tease out. How do I find out about my community? Because here's something I've noticed is that many of our churches, large and small, are now commuter churches, where the church may be in this community, but 90% of the members, 85% of the members don't live in that community. They live in surrounding communities. So even in that inherent buying into the community, they're not buying into the community because they're not living in that community. Right. How do we learn about our community?
I mean, you can literally go to the court systems. You can look at the data that is in the civic, the Chamber of Commerce. There's so many ways in which you can literally Google that actual community.
And I'm going to put a plug in for the ministry and evangelism. We have a platform called Mission Insight that will give you more demographics and more information about your community than I'm not even sure I know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And I've done some study in it. So the resources are there. It's just, how do we take advantage of it?
How do you pivot that data into actionable items?
But is there also some value, and we've talked in episodes past about being involved in our community, is it valuable having conversations with the thought leaders of our community?
That was going to be my next thing. So
there you go.
having connecting with civic leaders, being part of the community. Sometimes you can just go to the barbershop and sit there and just talk to people.
Barbershop.
Yeah.
You and I don't need a barbershop.
I know, but
anyway, okay, just
I can get a shave. But you go to events that are happening. Go to the city council meetings. Meet your representatives. I know some people are like, oh, that's church and state. No, you're not trying to make a state religion. You're just simply getting to know who they are serving so that you can also serve. So there's a lot of go to the police department, the fire department, talk to the chief. There's a lot of things you can do.
And here's what I know about our community leaders. They want to talk to us.
Yes.
Because they see us as a church as an integral part of the community.
A partnership.
and they are not going to be put off by the pastor or some of the leaders going to talk to them and say, hey, how can we serve you?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be welcoming that. And in those conversations, then you get a little better sense of how can I better communicate with my community?
Absolutely. Let me kind of give an example. Like,
Sure.
So, holiday season rolls around, Christmas, whatever the case may be. And whenever your spouse wants something, they drop hints, breadcrumbs, My wife, when she wanted an Apple Watch, she was like, man, my watch is not working right, or it keeps dying on me. Or, she dropped these hints, and so if I came and, Christmas time, and she opens up the thing and it's a Fitbit, that's not what she asked for. Well, communities are doing the exact same thing.
Love that.
They're dropping little things to let you know what's going on, what they're hurting about, what they're excited about, what they want to see happen. And they're dropping these little tidbits. And what we need to do is have our communication, community service antennas up. And once we pick up on those antennas, once we pick up on what's happening in the community, we then go back to our church and say, hey, listen, I saw that this was happening. What could we as a church do to effectively change that issue? In communication, we look at things such as problems. That's the first thing. What is the problem? The problem doesn't necessarily have to be something bad. It could just be something that is deficient, something that needs improvement, or something that has not been developed yet. And once you see that, you develop the problem statement of how we can address that. And then you go about what are the steps we can go to make sure that happens. And that is the way that you can do it. Speaking to people, looking at the demographics that you guys share, understanding that what's happening in that local community. Get some local newspapers. Read the local newspaper, see what's happening in the community. Honor people. Bring in recognition for community civic leaders. That's how you get engaged with it.
So, but here's the challenge we face in 2024 with technology. So we have the community that our church is in that we're trying to impact, but the internet and streaming and all that has now broadened dramatically my community. Now my community isn't just the people who come into my church every Sabbath or the community in which I live. Now my community may be people that are thousands of miles away, half a world away.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? Because that's a whole different community.
Yeah, that's a production. That is a production. And I try to tell communication leaders that when you're streaming your service, you're now telling people what your service is all about. So if there's some crazy stuff that happens in your service, you might want to maybe not stream. Maybe just do the sermon, share that or something like that. Because when you open the world up, you're literally opening your church up to the world. And whatever you want to put your best foot forward. Your mom used to say, when you step out the house, you need to put your best foot forward. Don't make us look bad. That's the same thing when we're streaming. Don't look bad. Do something that looks nice, that's professional. And once again, we go back to that bad word, plan. Practice, So when you open it up to the whole world, now you have to say, okay, how do we reach people online? And what is our strategy for that? It can't just be showing what's happening in the building. It has to be an engagement. How do we talk to these people who are watching us every week? How do we connect with them? How do we get them to, what's the call to action?
Right.
How do we get them from being a spectator to being a member?
And I think part of it is especially because of the way COVID, again, changed things dramatically. We were just happy with people being spectators because now they couldn't come to church. They can sit at home and watch.
Yeah.
But that's really not why we do what we do, to give just people a glimpse into our church. If people are showing up and watching our stream every Sabbath, they're inherently saying, especially if they're not part of our community locally, a member or shut in, or, they're saying, I value your church. I connect with your church.
Absolutely.
How do we as a church then show value? How do we engage with that person.
Well, one of the ways we can do that is we put our best foot forward. As I mentioned before, our stream should be professional. Our stream should be up to date. Our when they're looking through the lens of their TV, when they're seeing, our presentation should be one that represents Christ well. And I think sometimes we forget about the audience online.
Right. No, it's true. Absolutely.
And we should always recognize that they're there and understand that they're there and know that they at some point may be sitting in the pew. So we need to treat them with respect and love, and that means putting our best foot forward, doing what we can. And if we're not at that point, do what we can, cut out all the other stuff, or just stop streaming for a while and to get everything in order,
So what I hear you saying is put our best foot forward. Don't just turn the camera on and have what happened happen. Put our best foot forward. But also recognize that there are people watching online. And I'll be the first to admit that when I was in the local church at Arlington, when I would preach, I literally had to remind myself to a point where I wrote it down. Recognize the people online, because you're so focused on the people in the pews that you almost forget that the camera's out there and that there are people watching you. So put your best foot forward, but also recognize, hey, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And invite, and I like what you said, the call to action.
Mm-hmm.
What do we want you? Hey, why don't you, if you're watching on Facebook, give us a comment of where you're from or how your week's going. Those are small things that I think if we're intentional, and there's the other bad word in addition to planning and intentionality. If we do those two things, we can be very effective in communicating with our much larger community beyond just what's in our church and in our geography, area around our church.
Yeah. And we need to ask ourselves the question: are we ready to stream?
Wow.
We have to ask, are we ready to stream? Are we at that point where we're ready to stream? Or are we just streaming because everyone else is?
Right. And streaming has, again, COVID forced us to do a lot of things, which is good. A lot of people, a lot of things, a lot of churches that were not streaming all of a sudden had to stream because we had to.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenge of streaming, and I'm saying this as a local pastor, the challenge of streaming is that it's made some of our members a little bit lazy.
No.
I'm just, I know it's maybe just one or two churches, but people just, oh man, I don't have to go to church today. I can be the spectator. And that's where if you're intentional about the engagement, then all of a sudden, even our members who are like, oh, I'd rather watch the service in my pajamas than go to church, then all of a sudden they feel, if you're doing the call to action, hey, what do you want us to do? They can feel.
Correct. I mean, understanding that the ultimate goal is to present Jesus to them. And from that, the Holy Spirit will work on them, because you can't stay home if that service is engaging so much. You're going to want to be in that building. But it is not so much about getting them in the building as it is getting the message out of the building and in the lives of people. Because if we are communicating what Jesus wants us to do, it's going to affect our lives. We're going to go out there into the community. We're going to touch lives. We're going to try to bring people to Jesus for salvation. That's key.
So if there's a local church leader listening to this or watching this saying, man, we're a small church, we don't have the resources, what are some resources that your department and your team, which you have a phenomenal team, can provide to, and specifically I'll talk to our local churches because that's where the lack of resources usually happens, and across the board. What can you guys provide to our local churches?
Well, one of the things that we provide is the resource as individuals. We're a resource. Okay. So if a church is like, look, we want to do this, we try to help them plan that out. If they come to us and say, hey, look, we're thinking about doing this event, or we're connecting to the community, or whatever case, if it's a small, it doesn't matter the size. If a church is doing something in their community, we can be a resource to help amplify their message.
Okay.
So if they're, giving away back to school books, or we can connect with the journalists in that area,
Okay.
make a media connection, and amplify their voice.
Gotcha.
Another way we can is if they're dealing with sound issues or audio issues, or video issues, we can be a consultation and be like, hey, here's what you need to do to fix that. We can help you with that. We don't do website. We don't fix websites, but we can point them in a direction to webmasters or things like that. So we try to be a resource. One of the things that a local church may ask us to do is, can we get money? Can we get funding for something? Unfortunately, we have 365 churches. That's not feasible. That's not possible. But anything that we can possibly do outside of, giving cash or things like that, we try to be the assistance. Dealing with crisis issues, dealing with planning, strategic planning for communication events. We want to be that resource for them.
So one of the things that you guys have been doing here in 2024 and looking to do in 2025 as well are these communication workshops.
Correct. Yes. And
you've done a number of them throughout the conference here. Talk for a minute about that, and then talk about the event coming up in March of 2025. Yeah.
So we do these workshops called Connectopias. No, it is Connectopia. Okay, So we do these workshops called Connectopia, and the whole purpose of that is to connect people with the aspects of communication within a local church. We have a practical, hands-on sound issues, that you may be dealing with. We talk about some worship, some of the things online with worship. That's more of it's like an in-your-face kind of presentation, like, hey, you're streaming your audio sound, you have an audio mix online. We talk about that, the visual look of things. That's more of a kind of a theoretical looking at it. And then we also talk about storyboarding, storytelling, how to tell good stories from your church. Present those stories in a way that people can utilize those and really be impactful. So taking a testimony at the end of your church service, taking it and turning it into a video and sharing it on your social media page to get other people to join. So there's a lot of that going on. We do that in English and in Spanish.
Okay.
And then in March, it's going to be a little bit different. March 2025, we're going to be doing our Connectopia Summit, where we're coming together. Everybody bring your laptop, download DaVinci Resolve. We're going to talk about how to edit, short cut, some podcasting, some photography, some audio. This is hands-on. We're going to look at our broadcast system. Hey, here's some things that you can learn from live production. The way we do it, how you can think about camera angles, lighting, all of these different things. So that is a more practical. There's going to be some time we're going to be talking about some of the theoretical things, but more or less give us your experience, and we want you to come and get a hands-on experience for that workshop.
So they'll look for more information as we get a little bit closer to March of 2025.
Yes, we will be going through Advent Source.
Okay.
They can register through Advent Source. So it's going to be great opportunity to come. We want you to be a part of that, and this will be great. We might even do a little podcast setup like this there.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, you need to get a good-looking host. So, I'll see if I'm open that weekend. All right. Here's what I know, Ken. When you and I get together, we have a good time. We've only scratched the surface.
Yes.
And there's so much more. So the bottom line, the takeaway, if there's one thing you want people to remember out of this, our time together, what's your one big idea?
One big idea is, I think you said it, be intentional. The intentionality. Because if you know what you want to accomplish, you can ask the right questions to accomplish it. If you don't know what you want to accomplish and you do it, you're going to accomplish it. Okay. Nothing. So being intentional about it.
I like that. All right.
Here's
the lightning round.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Number one.
All right.
Beach or mountains?
What do you mean?
Do you would rather be at the beach or rather be in the mountains?
What time of year is it? I'm a communication person. I got to ask questions. So
if I said, Ken, I'll pay for a trip for you to go to the beach or the mountains,
I love scuba diving, so I'm gonna say beach.
Beach.
All right.
Favorite places. So I didn't realize you were a scuba diver.
Yes.
Where do you scuba? Your favorite
Caribbean.
places to go?
Caribbean. Let's see. Cozumel.
Oh,
Cozumel was beautiful.
gotcha.
But I wanna. We've done Belize, but I want to go to Grand Cayman, and we've been there before, but we didn't scuba dive there. We snoobed. So we went underneath the water.
Oh, okay.
And the tube was good. But I want to go scuba diving in Grand Cayman.
Wow. And Catherine, your wife, scuba dives.
Absolutely. She's my partner.
Look at her.
Yeah, she's my partner. Yeah.
She's by the way, for those of you who don't know Ken's wife, she is absolutely amazing. He very much married up. But anyway,
Yes,
we all
of course.
Number 2, most used app on your phone.
Most used app on my phone. Wow. That's dangerous.
We heard from Siri earlier. But
Yeah, she messed me up. Most used app. I'm gonna say LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
I'm gonna say LinkedIn, just because the professional, and I'm connected to a lot of communication people. So I'll say LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably say. Well, I don't, that and email.
Email, yeah.
Those are
All right. LinkedIn and email.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite hobby outside of ministry? You talked about scuba. Is there anything else?
Cycling.
Cycling.
I love cycling. Yeah.
For those of you who don't know Kenn, and did very much for what, 4 years determined?
Oh, 7.
Was it 7?
7 years. Yeah.
I can't remember back
It
that
was
far.
3 years here in Texas Conference, 1 year at Oakwood, 4 years.
See, that was all right. So that was long before I knew you. So
yeah, first time we did it was from Dallas to San Antonio for GC.
that's right.
Yeah.
2015. Wow.
2015. Yeah.
That's crazy.
During
I
the
remember
summer.
hearing about that now that you say
During the
that.
summer, burning up.
Yeah, no
Hot.
kidding. So cycling, yes, you're definitely a cycler. One thing on your bucket list.
One thing on my bucket list. Wow, that's a. One thing on my bucket list. I don't know.
Oh man.
I mean, there's a lot of.
Sounds like scuba diving Grand Cayman. I mean,
Yeah. Honestly, I would like to. I don't think I'll ever do it, but I would like to cycle across America.
that's on your That's a perfect thing to put on.
Yeah,
your
but
bucket
I'll
list.
kick the bucket if I do that.
Well,
so
you
I
know,
will probably die if I do that one. So
Do it in stages, kind of like Appalachian Joe. Do it in stages. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
if I had a superpower, I would say influence people for good.
Oh, that would be quite the superpower.
Yeah. Everybody I come in contact with, I don't even have to touch them. I could just look at them and influence them for something good.
I like that. I'd love to have that. I don't know what we would call that.
Yeah.
That's a little, or what you'd have on the front of your
Just a big G.
A G. There you
big G.
Good. That's right. Last one.
All right.
Best piece of advice you've ever received.
The best piece of advice that I've ever received came from a mentor of mine in ministry, and is Dr. William T. Cox. And he said, your gifts will make room for you.
Okay. How do you apply that? That is very profound, but I want to see why that's made such an impact on you.
Because he always said that your talents, the gifts that God has given you, will always provide you where you need to be. It's never politics. It's never bribing someone. It's all about the gifts that God has given you will put you where you need to be. And if you're there, then you're supposed to be there. And you will always do well as long as you trust God. That's been the best advice.
Wow.
And that's 20 years.
Profound.
That's 20 years.
Well, I will say this, my friend, your gifts have brought you to us here in the Texas Conference, and it's so great to have you as one of our colleagues. Again, we have a lot of fun. If people can't tell we have fun when we get together, then they've totally missed the boat. But Kenn, thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for the great team that you have in the communication department. And again, I want to encourage our churches to reach out to you and your team for these resources. Because again, you're able to help come alongside of them, small church, large church, whatever they can, to be better communicators with their members, but more importantly, share the love of Jesus with their community, because Jesus is coming soon.
Absolutely.
We are done with another podcast episode. We have one more yet for this season, but we're already planning for 2025. So thank you for joining us at the Leadership 360 podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time as we continue to grow as leaders that Jesus has called us to be.